Because what I've found is that a lot of people are stuck, right?
Yes.
They're stuck in their grief. And God, the universe, whatever we want to call it, right? The ancestors, they still have purpose for us. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's so many people who can't get to the purpose because they're stuck when mama died. They're stuck when dad died. They're stuck when the baby died,
Yeah.
right? And so this is a way to get people unstuck. This is what I've always
Mm.
believed.
Dr. Lakara is a proud native of New Orleans, Louisiana. She currently stars in the new YouTube show, The Gift, a web series following her life as a psychic medium, minister, and spiritual teacher. She shares her gifts of helping reunite people with their departed loved ones and giving them the gifts of healing, closure, and peace, while helping them to see death, life, and God in a new way. And you were also nominated to be Author of the Year for which book?
My book, The Grown Woman's Guide to Greatness.
Ooh, that's a
That
good
was book number 3. Yeah.
And you have a new book, The Morning After, coming out, which people can
Yes.
pre-sale now.
Yes.
Which it has such a gorgeous cover and title. Can you talk to us a little bit about the book to start?
Yes. So the book is The Morning After. It's healing grief through mediumship and learning to live and love again after loss. So it's really looking at how mediumship can be a tool and is a tool for helping people to heal their grief.
I think the way that we met is I actually got an email that said that you were going to be the first Black woman to headline Lilydale.
Yes.
And I was like, that is so exciting and revolutionary. And then I saw you were doing a course about ancestors. And those people who listen to the podcast know that I am deeply on this journey of connecting with my ancestors. I get signs from them like 3 to 8 times a day. Like they're constantly showing up for me and around me. And it's been a real blessing. But I went to Lilydale to learn more about kind of connecting with them. And I will say sometimes it's really hard to resonate with some of the teachers. Sometimes you just don't connect.
Yeah.
And I felt like the minute you walked in with your orange, I was like, oh, baby, I'm home. Like, I'm so excited to just drink you in. And it felt so validating to hear. Can you tell us a little bit more about Lilydale? What was that experience like for you?
Oh, wow. So it was very much a full circle moment.
Mm.
I talk about having, I've had this gift my whole life without necessarily having the vocabulary to really express. And you got to forgive me, I'm hoarse. It was my birthday weekend.
Oh,
So you
yeah,
could
no
just,
worries.
yeah. And so without necessarily having the language or the vocabulary to understand or explain what it was, I just was experiencing it. And then in about 2000, and I think it was 10, um, a documentary came out called No One Dies in Lilydale on HBO.
Mm.
And it was so phenomenal to me. It was like, wow, like these people have the same gift that I have. They're experiencing the same things. They're able to communicate with spirit, and they are called mediums. Okay, that's what I am. And
Yeah.
so that kind of really set me on the journey to further understanding this gift and being able to work with people and connect them to their loved ones and giving them closure, giving them peace, giving them some healing with this God-given gift. So I got a phone call last October, and I was sitting at a friend's wedding, and I'm, kind of scrolling. They're just waiting on the wedding to start, and it is one of the people from Lilydale, and they were
Mm.
inviting me to be a part of their summer season. And they're like, "We don't know if you've ever heard of us," and I'm like,
Yay.
like bugging out, right? Like
Yeah.
this is such a full circle moment. That not only because I talked about in 2010, like I'm gonna go and visit that place one day.
Yeah.
And I just, over the years, I just kind of think about it, and I would just kind of research it and look at some things. So to be able to be invited, and not only to be able to be invited, but also to be the first African American woman to headline, that was like a big deal, right? For
Yeah, absolutely.
just really and ushering in a diversity and inclusion, and not necessarily being separated. And so it was a big deal, and just the experience itself was phenomenal. Like everyone was just so loving and so warm. The workshops were amazing, and it was so funny because I kept saying, like, I was like, why are the workshops 3 hours? Like I didn't realize that until like the week before. And I was like, I was like, we're not going to get through 3 hours. And so to see us like get to the minute of three
I
hours,
know.
like in a
It
workshop, it
blazed
was
by.
awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And the feedback received and the people I connect with, I can't wait to go back.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, Lilydale is like this little town. It's about an hour away from Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
And in order to have a house there, you actually have to go through their like board or ministry
Yeah.
or
Hmm.
and qualify as a medium or as a psychic. And it's a very enchanted little place. It's a
It
small little
is.
village. It's full
It
of
is.
walking paths and outdoor ceremonies. My favorite things are like the outdoor chapels,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I'm sure have a different name, but are so gorgeous. And they're such beautiful spaces. I think
Yeah.
even just being on the grounds, I felt like very open
Yes.
in a
Yes.
different way.
I think there's such, and I don't know where all of the vortexes are, but I know there, someone said that there are vortexes in Lilydale, like these
Oh,
spaces of
sure.
energy, and of course, like Sedona, Arizona. So now I'm like, I want to know where some of the other vortexes are, like in the country, in the world, right?
I think
But you can
Maui has some
certainly,
vortexes.
oh
I think there's
wow,
some in Hawaii.
wow, I could believe that. I could totally
Yeah,
believe that.
there's
Yeah,
something, one of the smaller islands definitely has some.
wow, wow. So
Yeah.
you can definitely feel the energy in Lilydale. Absolutely, you can feel it.
Hmm. So I know that I've heard you say in interviews before you were around like 3 or 4 when you felt your gift.
Mhm.
And then it took you, as you were saying, a while to kind of find the language. When you could feel it, like what does that look like? Like, are you physically seeing spirits? Are you hearing them? Like, what is it like to someone who doesn't have like that gift? What is it? Like, how do you
Oh,
like how
that's
does it
so
come
such
to
an
you, the
interesting.
spirit?
So with me, I usually like if my friends or my family see me doing this, right? This is my tale that
Mm,
I'm sensing spirit around me. I don't necessarily always have to act out on it, but it's just kind of like it's I don't always notice that I'm doing it. I'm just like, okay, I'm feeling something here.
mm-hmm,
And it's not always a physical feeling. Sometimes it could, be a physical feeling. Like for example, yesterday I was given a reading, and all of a sudden I felt very warm, and I
mm,
started asking the lady about the client. I was like, "Oh, you're having these hot flashes," or I was like, "Hot flash became my symbol for menopause because spirit wanted to talk to her about menopause,"
mm-hmm,
and so we kind of talked about that, and I was like, that had never happened before, to have like this physical sensation.
mm,
But sometimes spirit makes me smell things. Like I can't smell. I lost my sense of smell at like 27. Nothing traumatic happened. Just woke up one day and just couldn't smell.
yeah,
But when spirit wants me to connect with someone through smell, whether it's grandma's favorite perfume or
mm,
something mother would cook, they will make me smell that. So
yeah,
sometimes it can be a physical sensation. It's never anything that's like imposing on my physical body, if that makes sense. But most
mm-hmm,
of the time, it's I'm just aware, just a knowing. I don't physically see. I
mm,
could I could physically see when I was a kid, but I
okay,
remember being about 9 and saying like I didn't want to see, right? And so
okay,
that part of it just kind of left, never came
yeah,
back, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But I remember instances of being anywhere from like age 3 to 9, being able to see every now and again, like spirit, like at my mother's aunt, my great aunt's funeral, like
mm-hmm,
she was there. And
mm.
I was 3, and I remember just kind of thinking, like, oh wow, like you get to come to your own funeral when you die. Like that's kind of cool, right? Like
Yeah. And
not
then
knowing that no one else is having this experience.
for sure, my mom will smell cigarette smoke in her house. And I think it's her
That
parents just kind of
yes,
like saying hello. And so
absolutely.
definitely have had those kind of nods in the family. Sometimes I'll see like a flash of something,
Yeah,
of like a shape or a body that I recognize. Like the other day I was in my bathroom and I saw my old cat that I hadn't thought
wow.
about in like 20 years. And I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
what's Maddie doing in here?
yeah,
Like what's, it
absolutely.
was such
And
a weird,
I tell people all the time with every presentation or every reading, or like every day, I'm saying this 100 times today. I'm not talking to dead people, right? There's
yes.
no such thing as dead. All we are energy. We're energy
Mm,
before we enter these bodies, while we're in them, and when we depart from them. And this gift just allows me to be able to tap into that energy, which I believe that we all can tap into that energy. Some of
yeah.
us, just are able to focus more on it and explain it and understand it, but we all can connect in that way.
Um, I want to pivot a little bit because I know
Yeah.
that you're very interested in, I don't want to say like the religious aspect of spirituality, but
Mhm.
yes, that's would be accurate to describe, right? As an associate or
Yeah.
assistant pastor.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk to me a little bit about how those things combined and like how that manifests for you? Because I feel like I was raised Catholic,
Yeah.
and the word God for me, and you have said this before in other interviews, that like sometimes the church can scare people, right? It's this big
Yeah.
institutional building.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a queer woman also. So sometimes I feel unwelcome in those spaces.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, for a lot of reasons, honestly. But so can you
Yeah.
talk to me a bit about your journey with the church and kind of feeling called to be a pastor?
Absolutely. So what's interesting is I come from a long line of women pastors, right?
Mm,
On my father's side. Ever since I was like younger, my father would always say, like, you're gonna preach, right? You're gonna be a pastor. And I'd be like, yeah.
mhm.
So it
He
wasn't
saw it.
until yeah, oh, absolutely. He sees too very well.
Mm,
And so it was about 2008 or so when my journey, because I always tell people like we didn't grow up in church, right? We went every now and again, but like some of my counterparts are like, Pentecostal, apostolic, like they went like 7 days a week. That
yeah.
wasn't my journey, right? And so for me, I didn't really get the indoctrination. I didn't really get, the dogma. I didn't really get a lot of that, which they experience, which a lot of them are queer as well.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of unlearning and unconditioning that they're having to do that I didn't have to do. So for me, I've always felt like I've had this amazing relationship with God.
Mm,
And the church piece for me was really understanding. I wanted to know who Jesus was, right? I really
mm,
wanted to understand, not just from a religious aspect, because I really think that if we delve a lot into it, it wasn't a lot of religious stuff happening with Jesus, right? It was really more mysticism,
yeah.
and really understanding this walk of being able to walk this fine line of divinity and humanity, right? Which is what I
Mm,
believe that Jesus was trying to show us,
sure.
which is why every single miracle Jesus was doing, Jesus was like, and you can do this too. So I
Mm,
think it was more about tapping into our own innate inner power, right? Our own
yeah.
supernatural gifts. That's my thought on it. And so for me, the church piece was really understanding Jesus from a metaphysical perspective.
Mm,
The walking on the water, the changing water, the wine,
yeah.
those aspects. And also Jesus being a medium, right? Like
Mm.
understanding that Jesus was able to
See, I'm
talk
part of
to
now. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm a devotee too. I'm ready to join. Like this is all speaking my language. It's all feeling good.
yeah. So like when Jesus, is talking to uh gosh, why am I forgetting this right now? Moses and I believe Elijah, hope I'm saying that right. It's like, oh, you're talking to people who've already gone on, right? And then there were
Mm,
people who saw Jesus after Jesus had physically left this place, which means that they too had the gift of mediumship if they're able to connect with,
right.
a person who was physically here and
But
is
it's
no
no
longer here,
longer.
but here, right here in spirit.
Wow.
And so those are the things that
My
I
mom's
kind
gonna
of,
like that.
yeah, that I kind of tapped into and that I'm, looking at to say, yeah, like this is what we're supposed to do. That's my thought, that's my belief. Now, and again, understanding that I didn't come into this religion part of it with any unconditioning that I needed to do, right? There
Hmm.
was some things like I don't necessarily refer to God as he, right?
Yeah.
I would say just God, right? Or the
Hmm.
universe or consciousness. So that little
We
bit of
call it Mother
conditioning.
Nature in my house.
Right, absolutely right, mother. And so it's so interesting because when I was getting my doctorate, we could not say, if you said he, you had to say slash she, right? You could not,
Mm,
or you would get points taken off your paper, right? So
good.
really, like, yeah, really looking at it from that perspective. So, and really truly, like, even with this gift, like God saying, I knew I had this gift. I knew it was like on the doing my piece with the church, but they were not integrated, right? And I
Mm.
wasn't keeping them separate from any particular reason. I just think like that's just the Virgo nature in me. Like we will compartmentalize
Well, and
things.
you have mentioned before that some people in the church, might not be open or
Yeah,
understand, or there's a judgment to it. It's not,
yeah,
something where we immediately connect the two of them. So I
yeah,
understand why it wouldn't be a natural thought to do so.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, so, but then it was just like, God was like, no, you have to integrate it, right? And I'm
Hmm.
like, but why? Right. And So even when I was getting ready to go and work on my doctorate, we had to choose like a project that we would work on. And I was like, well, I'm going to do women in leadership in the church. And the Holy Spirit was like, you're not, like, that's not what you're doing it on. You're doing it on your gift. Right. And so I
Hmm.
was like, okay.
Wow.
So then I began, so I did it on the gift of psychic mediumship. And could this be a gift that could be utilized in the modern church? And so I, basically proved the point that yes, it could, right? Based on my research that I'd done in the surveys and what people experienced throughout my project. And so for me, it is, God said you got to integrate it.
Mm.
Now I understand that it is like every day somebody says, I've always wanted to see a psychic medium, but this is what I heard. But then I heard you
Right.
say you love God. So then I was like, okay, I can go and see her. Right.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because I feel like I have like five ideas floating around in my head, but
Yeah.
you have also talked about like the use of therapy as part of healing grief. And so,
Absolutely.
like, obviously, church is one of those pillars of healing, but there comes a point, and similar to therapy, where maybe there's a message you needed to, maybe the reason that I feel so connected to my ancestors is because we're having an ongoing relationship. Like, I need support, I get
Absolutely.
support, I need to feel things, I'm feeling things. um and so I think this idea of being able to connect with while you're grieving, either
Yeah.
through a psychic or through the church or through therapy,
Yeah.
like these are pillars you can use to help your healing, which I don't think a lot of
Absolutely.
people are connecting all those dots.
Absolutely. And I say all the time that there are layers to healing, right?
Mm,
Absolutely, church is a layer. Absolutely, therapy is a layer. And absolutely, mediumship can be a layer as well, right? And is a
mm-hmm.
layer. And I remember working with this client who, um, and she's since passed, but I remember her coming to me about 2 years ago. And immediately we're on the video and I tell
Mm-hmm.
her her father is coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, the father's coming through to apologize.
Mm,
And I'm like, you were an outside child, but what I was seeing, I was like, you were outside, but you were still inside. Like, what is that? And she was saying she was, his secret child, but it was an open secret, and everyone went to the same church, and she had to
mm,
endure knowing that that was her father and not being able to connect with the other kids and all of these things. And so I was like, he wanted to apologize and everything that he came and said and showed me. And at the end of the reading, she said to me, she says, I've been in therapy for 20 years. And she's like, and this is the first time, like, I feel like I've gotten what I needed, like within
mm,
30 minutes. She's like, I could have never gotten the apology in therapy. I could have never gotten the apology in church. And she's
right.
like, but sitting with you and knowing you don't know my story, you don't know anything about me. And Spirit is giving you all of these things that only I can confirm for you. It
Mm-hmm.
was like, for her, it's like, yeah, like I did the therapy thing, I did the church thing, but this is the thing that I needed. And then I tell people, but after you get the reading, right? Because the readings confirm that our loved
Mm-hmm.
ones are still, in fact, with us, right? Just in another realm in the
Yeah.
spirit world. Therapy will give you the tools that you need to live without them.
Mm,
How do I go without talking to my mom every day?
right.
Right? Without talking to my dad. When Christmas comes, I need those tools. And so
Mm,
the mediumship kind of teaches us the continuing bonds. The bonds never end, right?
right.
And therapy says, but what do I do now?
Mm-hmm.
And then church gives us, I believe, the faith to just believe that, yes, they're okay. Yes, we're going to get through this. Yes, it's going to be hard, but, we'll prevail.
I have some questions for you. So
Yeah.
my uncle passed away via like an alcoholic bender or something or
Okay.
other, and my aunt is like constantly trying to connect with him, and
Mm.
has not been successful in having a conversation with him about his death. Has the spirit ever like, are people not ready to talk? Is there like a reason that she's not being heard in that conversation, or do you know what I
Well,
mean?
yeah, absolutely. So you came to the grief workshop. The workshop the
Yeah.
next day in Lilydale was called Why Won't They Talk to Me?
Okay. Well, my
Overcoming
aunt needed to
barriers,
go to that one.
overcoming barriers to spirit communication. And one
Yeah.
thing that I talk about in this workshop is the fact that the spirit is always communicating with us, right?
Hmm.
We are the ones that's usually missing the message.
Okay.
And so there's a couple of different things. One is I tell people, when we're so consumed with how they will show up, right?
Mm.
We
Okay.
we want to, or sometimes our grief gets in the way. We want to hear from them, We want to
Mm,
talk to them again,
right.
right? And because we are longing for that physical
Hmm.
connection, we miss all the other ways that spirit is trying to show up, right?
Wow.
The
Okay.
white feather, the
Hmm.
song, the billboard, the the message from someone else, the smell, right?
Hmm.
The coins on the ground. Like there is an unlimited amount of ways that spirit is like, I leave a quarter on the dresser every day and she just doesn't even notice that there's a new quarter, right? Like
Yeah.
what, like however
I
spirit
know.
is
I
trying
just
to
found
show
a
up.
dime actually when we were when I was like moved it out of my way. I was like, who sent me a dime?
Exactly,
Somebody's
right?
been sending
That's
me
my
money
hope.
this week.
Right. And that could be your uncle, right?
Yeah.
So us, and even with us having this conversation. So I always say like we're missing the
Mm,
signs. It's not that they're not trying to communicate. And so then that's when sometimes, maybe she does need to see a medium. Maybe a medium can get a message through for her to say, hey, this is what he's saying, and this is what he's communicating, and this is how he's saying you can look for him. It
would
could
there
be the
be any
cardinal.
reason why like a spirit like wouldn't show up or wouldn't be part of a reading or wouldn't be present?
I usually say it just may be because they don't have the message, right?
Okay.
Or they don't have a message for the person. And
Okay.
so I'll tell people, just because grandfather is not saying anything, it doesn't mean grandfather doesn't love you. It just means that grandmother is the one with the message, right? Or the
Right.
uncle is the one with the message. And so spirit is always going to give us what we need, not necessarily
Hmm.
always what we want.
Yeah.
We can't, the same way spirit won't impose itself on us, we can't impose ourselves on spirit, right?
Mm,
And so when the message is ready, if there is a message, they will stop at nothing to get the message through.
mm, okay.
Yeah.
Um, circling a little bit back to the Holy Spirit, how
Yeah.
do you decipher the energy from like a divine place
Mhm.
and getting that kind of message? Do you have to like, are you meditating? Are you like in a certain, like, how does that come through?
um I would probably say yes. I think the thing for me is one, because people always ask me, can I turn it off? Right. And I'll
Hmm.
say, no, like there's no turning it off. But it's almost like imagine a television running for 24 hours a day. Every
Yeah.
now and again, you're tuned into the program, right? Like,
Right.
oh,
Right.
Wheel of Fortune is on. Oh, and so that's
Yeah.
kind of how it is for spirit messages. Now, if I'm giving like specifically if I'm setting up for a reading, and I'm usually gonna, every morning I meditate or I pray. Um, I probably do my sage at least, a couple of times a week, sage in my home, sage in my office.
Mm,
And then I'm just kind of always in communication. And it's so interesting because a lot of times, like even in Lilydale, I was telling them, for me, a lot of times spirit will show up first, right?
okay.
So spirit started showing up the day we got there. And so I would have my little notebook, right? It's one of many of my little notebooks, right? That I'm carrying around all the time with me. Spirit will show up and I'll say, like there was a woman whose son had been murdered. And I'm like, okay, the woman, son murdered, and I'm giving some details here. And then somebody's like loved one kept making me hear the theme song to Rocky, right? So I like put that like, okay, that's somebody's loved one coming through. And
Yeah.
and literally like when I was in the readings, I'm like, okay, whose loved one loved Rocky? Because they've been making me hear this theme song. And this woman
Hmm.
raises her hand and she's like, she's the only one. And she's like, her father, like that was his movie. He'd watched
Hmm.
them all. Like, and so then we were able to communicate with her about some things with the father and or the mother and everything.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, like yeah, it's always on. Um, and when I'm getting ready to do something, it's more when I'm tapped into it.
Yeah. And then when you're doing like a sermon or something, is it the same energy you're tapping into to like feel like whatever the divine messages are you're going to send to the congregation, or how does that work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Usually that is me praying like, okay, God. Like I look at it really truly like as oneness, right? Is
Hmm.
what I call it. And I believe that when we leave these physical bodies, we rejoin back to oneness, right?
Hmm.
Whatever we call that, whether it's our spirit guides, I believe that's a part of oneness. Ancestors, that's a part of oneness. All of it is a part of oneness. So when
Hmm.
I'm doing a sermon, or I'm communicating with God and asking God, what would you have me say? Right?
Yeah.
Because I never want to be in the way. I never want to give a sermon from Lakara. I do want to give
Hmm.
a divinely inspired word. Yes.
Mm. I feel like that's such a nice humbling thing to do too, of like, how do I create the space to have,
Yeah.
because I feel like I don't know, as an artist there is some kind of I don't know if vibration is the right word, or channel, where
Mm,
you feel connected to
yeah.
something.
Hmm.
I'm wondering about your writing and how like spirit works with you in your art and in what this is going to be the fourth book you're publishing. How does
Yeah.
it work for that?
So it very much is a divine process, right?
Mhm.
Usually I'm sitting there, and a lot of times I'm with this particular book, I am writing from experience. So I'm talking a lot about connecting to people and some of the readings that I've given, some of the lessons that I've learned from spirit, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like, spirit says death is not a punishment. Like that was huge for me, right? Because a lot of us feel like when someone dies, like, or if someone dies of cancer or someone is murdered, like there's some type of punishment that was attached. Like, no, like death is inevitable and we're all going to pass through that
You
door.
mentioned that in the workshop of it being an actual contract, a spiritual
Yeah,
contract with a date
yeah,
and a time and a place. And
yeah.
that was
That
very
we've
interesting.
decided on. Yeah,
Yeah.
that we've decided on. And so there are lessons that like that spirit has given me. So I talk a lot about that in the book. Like, and then sometimes it's like I'm, doing something and spirit says, oh, and go add this to the book. Right. And I'm like, okay, so
Mm.
I gotta stop what I'm doing. I gotta take some notes on my phone if I'm driving, I'm voice memoing and everything. So just kind of always trying to be tapped in and listening.
Yeah. I also feel compelled to talk about your partner,
Yeah.
Dre,
Yeah.
D.
Dread. Uh-huh.
What do we call them? Dred.
Yeah.
Um, I could not believe that they were doing the workshops with us. Like when you were passing out papers to like communicate, like we're
Yeah.
seeing them wipe tears away. Me and Mandy, who went with me, are like, wow, these two are like the real deal. The level of support and partnership
Yeah.
and just like their presence in the room with you was so
Yeah.
beautiful. So I just wanted
Oh.
to give a nod that was,
And
it
you know
almost
what?
felt like the two of you energetically were in the space,
Yeah.
and to see them let you shine in such a gorgeous way, I don't
Yeah.
know, it just was really moving.
Yeah. She is one, she's phenomenal, right? But it's so funny, right? Because she always knows, like she's always like, babe, please don't make me introduce myself. And I'm like, no, like you're gonna be a part of the workshop, right? Because I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like at the end of it, I want you to give me feedback on,
Mm,
what you
the
thought and what
process.
I've done better and stuff. And so when I was doing the letter thing, I really didn't think that she was going to do that part, and I would have been okay with that. But she
Yeah.
started writing a letter, and I could see that the only part I saw was like, "Dear Mom," right? And I
Hmm.
saw her crying, so I know, I was like, "Wow, like she's really doing this part
Yeah.
of it." And she's writing this letter to her mom, and she puts it in her pocket. Well, when we go to the main stage event on that Friday night,
Mm.
and Cindy Kaza is doing or Kaysa is doing her reading thing, her mom comes up,
Wow.
and it's like, I don't know, 200 and something people in the space, and her mom comes up, and it was just like such great confirmation. Like, you just wrote this letter to your mom, and boom, like a few hours later she's coming up, and for me it felt like I heard you, I saw you,
Mm.
and I'm responding to you like
Oh, wow,
almost
wow, wow.
instantly. It
Yeah.
was beautiful, it was so beautiful. I was crying so hard, like at that point. Like,
It's so amazing when we can get like gratification. I was doing a speaking event for postpartum mothers. I'm a postpartum survivor, and I did my second documentary about my first year of motherhood. And I was driving to the event, and I'm so nervous, and I'm like sweating, and I have to talk to all these mothers about their depression and
yeah,
kind of like, so then I start talking to my grandmother who had PPD twice. And I'm like, help
wow,
me, be with me, anybody
yeah,
out there, anybody, I'll take anybody who's around, like support me on this, like help me
yeah,
figure out what to say and, be a source of comfort and space for these women. And then this huge hawk flew over my car, which is my sign from my nannies, because she's from Oklahoma and there's all these hawks. So the
wow.
hawk is flying with me and then peels off. And I'm like, wow, that was good. Like, thank you, thank you.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I say, like, even when you're on, it really is about being open to
Hmm.
however they're going to show up.
Yeah.
Completely open.
I'm wondering, after you started identifying and labeling, okay, I'm a medium, I'm acknowledging these things, I'm acknowledging these signs. How do you, asking, for a friend, how do you
Yeah.
continue to develop your gifts and go deeper? Or like, what's the process? Like, did you read a book, or you're just going to Lilydale things? Like, what's the next, like, what should I be doing to kind of like continue my journey?
That's so good. I think for myself, what I find is that the more disciplined I am in like my eating, my
Mm,
working out, like
wow.
I can hear clearer, right?
Wow.
So
Wow.
sometimes
Wow.
it's like I can give a reading and it's like initials are coming through, right? But
Yeah.
then there's sometimes like when I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to do, I'm praying, I'm meditating, I'm eating right, I'm working out, I'm doing those things, I can hear even clearer, right? So like
Mm,
full names are coming through or the pictures coming in clearer. So for me, that is kind of the developmental path that I'm on, is really disciplining myself in those ways.
wow.
Um I don't know how much more, like in terms of being, like the psychic piece and medium piece. I just think that it just is, right? But I
Yeah.
think that I'm defining it more or having more clarity. The more clarity I am in my being, right? The more
Mm,
disciplined I am in my being.
yeah. It's so funny. I was in a spin class, and they
Mhm.
started playing Neon Moon, which is like a song that I used to hear and listen to in Oklahoma with my grandmother. And then I saw my my grandfather dancing to the song,
Yeah.
and just being and like feeling their energy and like being on this spin bike. And
Yeah.
I feel like there was like a physical connection between like having my body be like at such a fast heart rate and be, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
To have
absolutely.
that connection come through. And because I don't ever see people, in that
Right.
way. So it was a really special kind of
Yeah.
like
And
moment.
yeah, absolutely. And I know that when it's those things that I'm doing, even cleaning up, like I'm going through this process of like decluttering my home, right? And
Mm.
getting rid of a bunch of things. Like
That's
even
one way
that
to
makes it
clear the
happen.
spirit for sure.
Right.
Rage clutter, like decluttering.
Absolutely. And that's literally the first thing when I'm teaching a course. The first week of class is them creating a sacred space, decluttering
Mm.
their space so that they can have a place to, to operate in.
Yeah, I love that. What is the weirdest place that you've ever given a reading? Have you ever been like in the grocery store or at Target and you're just like, oh my gosh, here we go. Like I have to deliver this message.
Listen, absolutely. I was we were on the highway coming back from New Orleans. This just popped in my head. And I was in we were at the sub shop. It was like it wasn't a Subway, but like one of those sub shops, right?
Hmm.
And like a Jersey Mike's or something.
Yeah.
And I'm in there and I'm this young woman's grandmother was coming through and she's making my sandwich. And I'm like, oh my gosh, right? I know. And so I like she makes the sandwich and the grandmother's like telling me, tell her this, right? Tell I'm really proud of her. She's in school,
Hmm.
after, whatever, a while and da da da. And I'm just like, ugh. So I get the bag, right? And I'm walking all slow to the car. And I get in the car and my best friend goes, did you have a message for that young lady? And I was like, I did. She's like, go, get out the car, go. She's like, we're not leaving here until you go get the message. So I walked back in. I'm like, okay, I don't want you to think I'm weird or anything, but these are the things that were coming up. And I just
Yeah.
like she's like crying in the sub shop, like, but
Oh.
so grateful because
Hmm.
her grandmother had like just passed, like maybe like a couple of months before.
Yeah.
And the grandmother raised her.
Hmm.
And so there was like that connection, like a mom's grandmother, connection.
Yeah.
So that for me, it's like, but that, the grocery store, restaurants, like, you name it, and it's
Happened.
happened.
Has
Yeah.
anyone ever been like in my brain? It would be like my dream to. I'm always like walking around Lilydale, like waiting for someone to be like, "Here, somebody's with you." Do you know what I mean? But
Right.
has there ever been anybody who's like mad about a message or like uncomfortable
No,
or no?
no, because I usually always ask or I'll explain to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remember this one time because this was kind of an interesting time too. Um, I was in New Orleans, that's where I'm from. And I remember driving up and because going to this event, I'm in like the French Quarter area, and I'm driving up and I see this couple. And this couple is like phenomenally beautiful, right? They are a beautiful couple. And I just kind of know, like, that's a very beautiful couple. And it's walking hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And, a couple of hours pass. It's like this whole kind of like street thing. And I'm with this girl, and we're just kind of like walking around seeing all these art displays. And we run into the couple. And she's just like, oh, let me introduce you all to my friend. And this is Lakara, and this is her friends or whatever.
Mm.
And I'm sitting there, and the mother energy for the young woman like instantly comes through. It was like a setup, if that makes sense, right? And I told this young, I was like, I was like, I'll kind of always like, hi, like,
Mhm,
don't want to
mhm.
freak you out or anything, but I'm a medium, and this is what I'm able to do. And I feel like I have a message for your mother who's on the other side. And when I tell them the person who's coming through, it's just kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
wait a minute,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
wouldn't know that because I don't know you.
Right.
And so I was able to give her the message. And the guy who was with her was like, you're the boyfriend. I was like, you guys broke up a while ago. You got back together. And I was like, no, the mother's like, you're the one, right? And I'm like,
Mm.
the mother chose you for her daughter. Like, and then 2 weeks later, like he proposed. And it was so
Wow.
interesting because they told me their story, and I should have kept up with them. I kept up with them for a little while. But he was saying like he wanted some confirmation that it was like this is,
Mm.
he had already bought the
So the
ring.
mother had to swoop in and say, "Okay,
Yes,
this is it, baby. Like, you're
this
good.
is
You're good."
he had
Yeah,
already bought the ring, right? He was
I
just
love
kind of
that.
waiting to see. Mom comes in and it's like, no, this is what we're doing, right?
Mhm. As a mother
And
would, yeah.
right, exactly. And so those are like times where it's just kind of like people are always grateful for it. I've never had anyone to say like, no, I don't want a message. So
Yeah. Um, do you have any advice for listeners who are maybe grieving or have maybe lost someone? What are some kind of like ways that they can kind of open themselves up to receiving signs and messages? How do we kind of open our hearts to receiving notes from the other side?
oh, I love that. I think I would say one is going back to what I said, right? That one, death is not a punishment, right?
Mm,
That our loved ones aren't being punished. Two is understanding that the bond of love continues even after we depart these physical bodies, right? They're still with us. They're just in a different realm.
mm,
Um, and three, I think, well, I don't know three, but I would say also knowing that they're always trying to show us that they're with us, right? They're always trying to communicate with us in some ways, even if they don't necessarily have a message, right? Because sometimes I think, when people come to see the medium, it is usually they're looking for a message of one, they're maybe looking for evidence, right, that
mhm,
their loved ones are still with us. But sometimes people need closure. They didn't get a
mm,
chance to say goodbye, right? Someone died of the drug overdose, someone died of COVID, someone had a heart attack. They didn't get a chance to say goodbye, or they need some healing, or they need some peace. Um, and I think just knowing that our loved ones, they're still here.
yeah.
Yeah, they're still here. They're still guiding us. They're still protecting us. They're still loving us.
Mhm.
They still want the best for us, right? And I think the most important thing that I find and I tell people is that they do not want us to grieve ourselves to death.
Mm,
That is absolutely what they do not want, right? Or they don't
right.
want us to. And I know that grief looks different for everyone,
Mhm.
but it's just like they're like, we're all gonna join one another one day, right? We're all going to be with our loved ones. You're going to be with your nannies one day. I'm going to be with my grandma one day, right? They don't want us to rush that. They want us
Right.
to enjoy all the moments we have here up until the moment that we cross over.
Mm. Ooh. You know, when you hear something that like feels true and you feel it in your stomach, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful, like full feeling,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
what you're giving me now. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I have one more question for you. So
Yeah.
my husband's mother passed away via a brain aneurysm when she
Mhm.
was pregnant with him. So he's
Wow.
never met her before.
Okay.
And I think we're both like, I, I guess he's like a little bit open, but I think
Okay.
part of his problem and his block, if I can speak for him, is that he
Yeah.
doesn't have any memories of this woman. So like when
Mm,
I smell vinegar, I think of my grandmother. Like when I see a
yeah.
flamingo, I think of the painting. Like there are all these different memories that I'm able to tap into to feel those
Yeah.
signs and to know.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone who doesn't have memories of that person? Like I feel like he struggles to like ground down on signs.
Yeah. That's so interesting because I think that sometimes, like if I've had these scenarios before, like my nephew's girlfriend came for a reading, And she was 10 months when her father passed.
Mm,
So the father was confirming things that were happening now, right?
okay.
Like the father is bringing up things that are happening in the house, things that
Mm-hmm.
he's like doing. And she's
Yeah.
like, of course, I wouldn't know, right?
Right.
So
Right.
for her, and also there were things that she didn't know, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that her sister, who was older,
Could
when
confirm.
he could confirm,
Gotcha.
right? That it was like, yeah, dad's here. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that was the main thing that she wanted to know. Like, even though I don't remember him, I was only 10 months old and she's 21 now,
Mm-hmm.
he's still with me.
Yeah.
And I know that he's with me because the medium is telling me stuff that's happening in the house or bringing up things about, like he brought up this something about the chain.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, he's talking about a chain and it has a cross on it. And at first they thought we were talking about a chain that her sister had that he had given to her, the sister. But the
Mm-hmm.
grandmother confirmed that no, the grandmother says one day we went to the graveyard and there was just a chain with a cross on the grave. And the
Mm,
grandmother's like, we have, and this was recent. So the grandmother's like, we don't know where it came from. We don't know who put
mm,
it there. We don't know. And dad is bring this up because they're going to know, right? Like dad passed 20 years ago. They're talking about a chain that was on the tombstone several months ago.
right.
Spirit is still here with us. So I
Yeah.
think for your husband, if he saw the medium, I believe that the evidence would be not just things that he may not know, but things other people may be able to confirm, but also things that may be happening right now.
Mm, I love that.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything that you wish people asked you about being a medium or any other questions that I missed as we're wrapping up here?
That's so good. I don't know if there's anything I wish people would ask. I think the thing that people discover through the readings is like how fun they can be,
Mm,
right? Or how much fun spirit still is when they're coming through.
yeah.
If mama was sassy, she's giving sassy energy still, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so, I had a reading yesterday and I'm confirming, I was talking to this woman about her mother who's still here. But I was like, the sister who passed was giving me the information and she's just talking about, mama's just sassy and mama's doing this. And she's like, and she needs to do this, this, and this. And the woman is cracking up because she's like, yeah, like that's how my aunt would come through. That is how what she would say.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how she would say it. So I think for those people who haven't had it or haven't had the experience to know, even when I'm doing like big, large group readings, there's a little bit of sadness there, but there's also joy.
Yeah.
There's also an element of humor and fun
Mm-hmm.
because if they were funny here, they're going to be funny on the other side too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such heavy work to hold grief in a way that's beautiful, and you do
Mhm.
that. And I just want to thank you
Yeah.
for the work you're doing in the world and making space for these conversations and adding in therapy and religion and all the layers, because
Yeah.
it is all the layers, right?
It is.
I also have one selfish question.
Yes.
Has spirit told you anything about aliens? What do we know
Oh,
about
that's
aliens?
So I believe in them, right? I
Uh-huh.
do. Me and my father, we laugh all the time because he absolutely does not believe, right? He believes in spirit communication, does not
Okay.
believe in aliens,
No
right?
aliens. Okay.
I personally believe in aliens. I don't know necessarily what that looks like or what that, but I just there's no way we could be the only life form in this whole entire
Yeah. Sure.
galaxy.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's just, for me from a logical perspective, I just don't believe
Mhm.
that they're I love Dolores Cannon. And so I follow her and I love all the things that she has to say
I'm gonna
around.
write her name
uh,
down.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, she's amazing. Yeah, she's amazing. She's departed from the physical realm, but she has a lot of different books out there.
Okay.
And I follow her on Instagram. So a lot of her stuff still pops up. I don't know who's still
Okay.
running her Instagram
Yeah.
stuff, but a lot of her snippets still, run. But no, believe, yeah. Encounters, no, but I've had readings with people who, said that they've had encounters and I believe them. Like there's no reason for me not to believe them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very alien curious, I guess would be
Yeah,
I'm very like
absolutely.
interested in like what's out there. And
Yeah. I just don't believe it. I don't think like when I think of like Star Wars and I think of Independence Day and I think of like all of these things, close encounters, from the third kind.
Mhm.
I just don't believe we could have dripped that up.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a level of like, if it has happened it will happen energy to that a little bit of like, if you can dream it, it can be a thing that can,
I don't believe that we dreamt this up. I believe that there were experiences and there were close encounters and there were people who, and then people talked about it and then people did movies on it and people, so that's my thought. There's no, you know, and then the government is confirming UFOs. And I think it's so funny, right? Because I've always believed, like I have a friend of mine who, he's in like really into it, right? And so we talk about it and everything. And you know, so we're kind of like laughing at the fact that now the government is confirming like, oh, there are UFOs, and like nobody cares because it's like COVID and inflation and high mortgage rates, and everybody's like,
I know, we're like,
we don't care about the aliens.
Too overwhelmed.
Exactly.
Poor aliens. Nobody cares.
Right. Like they're like, you should have bought us out 10 years ago, right? Like we're like, we don't care.
We'll add it to the list, I guess. That's what how I feel. I'm like, I got to add that research, but I haven't had time. It's fallen behind back to school stuff, you know?
Yeah. And one thing that Dolores Cannon says, I thought was so fascinating. She said, we were never, as human beings, like the human population, she says that we were never supposed to discover nuclear energy, right? And she says that the reason that we are experiencing these encounters with, you know, the aliens is because they're coming to check on us. Because if we like launch nuclear weapons, it impacts the entire solar system, the universe. And they're making sure, they're trying to make sure that we don't get to that, you know, that place that we're destroying. They're like, it's fine, y'all destroying Earth, that's fine. But
don't
you cannot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Someone's thinking about the world.
Right.
In the universe.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
Great question.
I know I had to slip an alien question in there.
No, it's perfect.
Thank you. I am so excited about this conversation. I don't know. I just feel so joyful and you've made my whole day. So thank you so much for being here and for chatting with me. And that's it.
Thank you for having me. Now everyone wants to know, because as soon as I posted, everybody's like, where can we listen? I'm like, it's not going to be live, but I was like, I will find out for you guys when it will air. Yeah,
I will send you the feed and everything, and then I'll do like social media clips and stuff. So you'll be good to go. I'll send you a whole like folder of assets.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to meet you. I don't believe in, you know, coincidences or accidents. And it was just such a pleasure to meet you. And I feel like we're going to continue this. This is going to be a lifelong conversation that we'll be having.
Yeah, I love it.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great one.